God's story, the parable of the unforgiving servant. So part of God's story is about a time Jesus taught his disciples how to forgive one another. And it goes like this. One day, Jesus was teaching his disciples, and Peter asked how often he should forgive people who have wronged him. Would forgiving someone 7 times be enough? Peter probably thought 7 times was more than enough because the religious teachers back then said you should forgive others 3 times. Jesus said, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. That's a lot of forgiving. But Jesus didn't mean we should keep track of how many times people wrong us. So to help the disciples understand, Jesus shared a parable with them. A parable is a story that Jesus used to teach something important. You may have heard of the parable of the lost sheep or the parable of the prodigal son. Jesus told those stories to help us understand God and follow him better. This parable was about a servant who owed a king 10,000 bags of gold. That's a lot of money. It would be like billions of dollars today, and it would take a long time to pay it back. When you owe something to someone, it's called a debt. And this servant had a large debt to the king. Since this servant couldn't pay the money back, the king ordered him to sell everything he owned, including his entire family, so that he could pay. The servant fell on his knees and begged the king for more time. He promised to pay it all back, but instead of making the servant pay him back, the king forgave his debt. He let the servant go without paying a single cent. That means he didn't owe the king anymore. Right away, this same servant left and went to find a man who owed him some money, much less than what he owed the king. The servant saw the man who owed him money and demanded he pay his debt. But this man didn't have the money to pay. He begged for more time, promised he would pay it back. But instead of forgiving the man, like the king had done for him, the servant imprisoned him until he could pay. When the king discovered that the servant whose debt he had forgiven had not forgiven the debt of someone else, he was furious. He called in the servant and said, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? Then the king had the servant thrown in jail until he could pay back everything he owed. Just like the servant had done for the man who owed him money, Jesus told the disciples that God is like the king in this parable. Just like the king forgave the servant's debt, God forgives us too, no matter how many times we sin. And because God forgives us, God expects us to forgive others. And that's a little bit about the parable of the unforgiving servant. So, in case you missed it, here's the quick version. Jesus told a parable. In the parable, a servant owed a king money. He couldn't pay. The king forgave the servant's debt. Someone owed the servant money. The servant didn't forgive him. He had the man thrown in prison. The king found out and was angry. He threw the servant in prison too. God forgives us, so we should forgive others too. And that's a part of God's story.